Mr. James.
And I'm Mr. Richie.
And we are the
Educators.
All right. Episode 10. Wow, we got here. Oh, man.
We got here. Episode 10. We didn't know if we were going to make it on season 3 because we assumed season 4 was going to start when we went full remote, which as of right now has not happened, even with all the craziness going on around.
And a most recent email we just got of another case
in the district.
So, yeah. So it is October 29th. It is Thursday. It is our time. We're not in the same room,
nope.
Obviously. And it's this episode is literally going to be mostly concerned with honoring the passing of the great James Randi. And if you don't know who this person is, we're going to fill you in. And you're going to want to know why this person existed and why.
And then you'll hopefully be inspired to go and look up some of his feats and some of the other things that he's done, because he's got a pretty impressive life. Unfortunately, he did pass away, I think it was like 10 days ago, something like that. Pretty sad, unfortunately, but yeah, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, unfortunately.
And it's horrible in the state. Past 2 days, right?
Horrible in the state. It's horrible in the country. It's horrible in the world. All the numbers are up. Weekly increase. So new cases over the last week, 360. That's not factoring in like the 80 something that just came out just a few hours ago. So that's up over last week's new cases of 211. So once again, we're not counting the accumulative cases anymore, because I don't think that data is very useful. But new cases does indicate if there's a problem. Yeah. And as of right now, we are in a steady upswing. Weekly increase in the United States, 529 million. Rounding up by 75 or so. That's up over 424 million the week before. So yeah, thousand. I'm really misrepresenting that. 528,927 versus last week 424,000. Yeah, I got confused with the world, because the world has a weekly increase this last week of 3,089,500. Whereas the previous week, it was 2,547,800.
Gee, that's a pretty big jump.
So these are all significant jumps that can't be ignored. That is for sure.
It's probably it's the second wave that everyone was talking about, right? It's the second wave probably coming through.
It's actually surprising they came in late, because especially for this state, we are pretty rural, so by nature we're doing okay. I don't think it's by design or compliance, but so it's steadily going up. But we're still teaching in person, hybrid, a couple of days a week for each group of students, and hasn't been an outbreak in our school. There hasn't been really big shutdowns, and I got to say that the plan worked. As of right now, like in our school, the plan has worked and we've been managing pretty good. But it does kind of seem a little onerous that all this stuff's going on around us.
Yeah, I feel like something's going to close in, and we don't know. I don't know what the breaking point is where we're going to actually have to close, but I feel they now and then when something happens and then they go, well, this person has tested positive, so anyone who was working with this person, and they've localized like 10 people and 14 people in this other part and stuff, and they say, okay, you're quarantined for 14 days, and they just kind of remove parts. It's like a machine that can work with missing parts. It can still work. Okay, take the parts out. I'm just wondering how many parts need to be removed from certain machines where they don't have to does possibly one of the schools in the district need to close for the other schools to close, just in case, if something happens or they go, we're crippled, we can't actually do it unless they have they do something where teachers go from their school to another school. I mean, honestly, that couldn't even happen with us because every one of our schools in our district doing a completely different thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I wouldn't volunteer to do that ever.
yeah,
No
we are
way.
glad we are doing what we are doing, and we talked about that because that's a big thing happening right now. Being asked if we want to change it in a few months, and the answer.
And personally, I don't think any value that is received by changing it will make up for reacting to the change.
Yeah.
I think it'll be at best a net equal energy exchange. Like it will take something from the other side, and so I don't. I'm hoping that everything stays the same because in a world full of change, it's kind of nice when normalcy.
Yeah.
But who knows when that's going to come to a screeching halt? But so far, so good.
Yeah. The other thing we do want to mention is that next week is going to be voting. And that's going to be, we don't talk about politics on here because we hate politics, and it's always around. We get things in the mail all the time. I opened up my mailbox. I'm getting a dozen things telling me, and they're opposites. Like this person is horrible, and then they go, that person's horrible. And it's like they're against each other. And I don't understand, like none of them have anything interesting to say. Anyone who politics anyways have some sort of the hubris of wanting to be in politics, the gumption someone has of just like wanting to be a politician is just hard. There's so many personality disorders that I can go over.
It's a necessary evil, though. We got to have politicians in order to have a society.
Yeah.
Politicianless society hasn't really existed, and even in ancient times there was a hierarchy or there was a power order, and it's, pick your poison. But, because I'm in politics, I am on a school board, and that's, just sneaking in under the door really in politics. But yeah, like there are certain people who tend to have, fame and fortune, in mind. And unfortunately that happens. You shouldn't become rich by being a politician, personally. Yeah. I don't think, but like that's a big problem in this country. But yeah, it's certainly something momentous. It's probably the biggest election of our lifetimes, and it's just only a few days away. I actually just voted today.
Yeah, it's very, very scary because we don't know what's going to happen and if both sides hate each other. And no matter what side wins, the other side may be retaliating in some way, and it's just going to be more strife and stuff on the planet. But
now, ultimately, all we can do is we should just use logic and reason and make up our minds based on evidence and facts. And
yes,
that's what if we all could just do that, I think that the
I don't
think we could be in this situation if we just did that. But it's a collective effort, and that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to do is spread the good news, the stuff that's out there that's important, whether or not it's good, cheerful or not, but like stuff that's important, stuff that is important to humanity, and things that are worth looking into versus these returnless, like no return for your investment sort of things, just like signing up like for politics sometimes like just seems like fortunate expenditure of energy sometimes, because you are taking part in the machine, part of the system, but individually not a lot of power. So we can stick to science and talk about what we have out there that's good that we can talk about.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into science in the news. I honestly don't really want to think about anything politics, and it's going to be something I'm not going to watch on the news, but I know NPR is going to be my 2 minutes in the morning that I get from my phone. So NPR One, everybody, NPR One. If you're American or anything else, try it. So first order. Now there's a theme this week, and I kept it like that, even though there's always more science. And that theme is space, because who loves it more? We love it. First one,
Yep.
LIGO and Virgo's gravitational wave tally more than quadrupled in 6 months. So what does this mean?
Well, it's just something that once we discovered the first gravitational wave, which is a ripple in space-time itself, then we kind of, once we knew that there was, one wave producer out there, it naturally went to figure that there's more than one gravity wave producer out there. So basically, a wave in traditional form is a difference in pressure in water. Water drips into a bucket, you see the ripples. It's a difference in pressure that is trying to find equalization, basically, and you see the change. Well, a gravity wave is a ripple in gravity itself, which is also kind of closely related to time and space itself. And it's what happens when two of the biggest, densest objects that could theoretically even exist collide. So an enormous, amazing, unprecedented, well, before we found the first one, it was unprecedented, but the force generated ripples time itself and space itself. And so it was theorized that you could measure this, and we proved it, I think a few years ago. They devised detection hardware, and they were able to pick up that there really was these gravity waves that were theorized. But then, of course, since then, we found more. Not a surprise. That's awesome. That means that they're probably getting better at detecting them. And there was a time where people were just sort of like, we will never understand what could possibly be in the middle of the Earth. No way. There's no way we could ever send sensors in there and stuff like that. But then they realized that they could take the wave forms from just seismographs, the things that measure earthquakes. But you can take readings of multiple seismographs, and you can actually make a sonogram of the Earth. Well, gravitational waves, there's a lot more information out there. We're just at the very cusp of this, and it could help us figure out a lot of really important information about the structure of the universe and where it all came from.
And that's actually, that's one of the things I like about once we learn about one thing, and then all of a sudden they find it everywhere, and they go, oh, this is happening now. So it's another measurement thing. Us, just to bring it into something at a level that we can understand, because we know the universe is infinite and expanding, and everything is so large and just so out of proportion to what we can understand in our basic life. We both have on a watch. And these watches measure things on us, and measure pulse, measure heart rate, measure blood oxygen, things like that. And that's one of the things where they keep getting better at this. And they go, oh, I didn't realize that we've already had technology that could do that, because they didn't realize that could be measured in such a way. So it's only going to keep getting better and better. And it's almost not always that we have to invent something completely different. It's just we just have to realize that what we have can also measure something that is present. We just didn't know how to say what it was, basically.
Yeah, well, it's data processing too, because back when seismographs were all just these, pens that drew on paper, we could not draw the same data that we could do when you have 20 seismographs over 100 square miles that are connected via the internet, and therefore you can see the ripples, you can see the pattern in the waves and stuff like that. And so it's sometimes it's not about even making a better device, it's about interpreting the data that the device gives in a different way. And that's what a lot of these are. It's like maybe the hardware is even the same between two watches, but the operating system, the processor, they are able to chunk up and figure out this information in a different way. And that's that's what this gravitational wave stuff could lead to, is just it's just like a revolution in what we know about what's out there. Like when you can measure ripples in space and time itself, that's a pretty powerful measuring tool.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like now we can measure what's actually inside black holes, even though we've already theoretically
Something like
figured that
that,
out.
Yeah. If it got sensitive enough that you could peer inside of something like that based on the vibrations that it gives off, and that's enormous. It's if they had that data in Interstellar, in the movie Interstellar, that would have been a shorter movie.
I just don't do that. Don't leave.
Yeah.
So next item, doubts over a possible sign of life. And this is a news item we had before that we talked about, where they found phosphine. They thought it was amazing levels of phosphine on Venus. And they said, well, phosphine obviously makes life, because this is something we find on Earth. This just is something that life can exist using phosphine, because we have some examples of that on Earth. But what they're showing right now is this big if, because there's all these other things happening, and these people, scientists, are coming in and saying, well, it could be this, could be that. And the big thing about this news item is that it shows how science works, basically peer review, how scientists tear other scientists, work apart for the good of science, because that's what science is, right? Science doesn't care.
Science is self-correcting. People talk about like a self-correcting free market. Well, something that's even more reliable than a self-correcting free market is self-correcting science, because of peer review, repeatability in studies, and with the when you're talking about finding signs of life on another planet, it is such an enormous statement to say that you found it, that it has to be looked at and really grinded through that data in order to really prove it, because it would change a lot of things, on Earth, if we really truly discovered unequivocal evidence of life on another planet. And it would have implications beyond just our daily life. I don't know if it would really affect daily life, but it should, if we discover that. But yeah, it's a very interesting. And now, in order to understand how science worked here, people should understand spectral analysis. Which maybe even someday we could go on a deep dive on that. But like, that's something that I prefer to teach. That's in my wheelhouse, because the light given off by anything can be analyzed, and you can figure out what it's made out of. And that's pretty interesting to realize, that you can analyze the light coming from an object, or even reflected off an object, and you can figure out what it is made of. And that's because color is a subatomic thing. Like it's because of quantum mechanics that color even exists. And when you analyze color, you can analyze the very consistency, the very things that stuff is made out of. And so spectral analysis is very reliable. And we first figured it out when we realized that the sun was made of helium and hydrogen. Helium was discovered on the sun before it was ever discovered on Earth, because of spectral analysis. And so in order to understand this detection method and this story, spectral analysis, and that's, so a lot of the laymen would say, how can we even know what Mars is made out of? How can we even know what Venus is made out of? Like we claim that we know that their atmosphere is this and that. It's spectral analysis. It's the same thing as how we measure what type of rock we have in our hand. You take a piece of it, bounce some light off from it, and proper equipment, and you can analyze the spectrum of the stuff that's inside of it. It's just using nature to provide more information about nature. And I think that's a important thing to talk about too, is that it just works. Spectral analysis works. If you don't want to look into it, you have to accept it as truth, because it is so good at determining what stuff is made out of. And it worked here, because if you look at it again, it looks like it was just some random changes in the data, like who knows what it could have been, but it wasn't something that could be consistently repeated. You couldn't detect it in the same spot on Venus. So therefore, most likely it doesn't exist. But we'll keep looking.
We're looking for that. That's one thing. And last item actually having to do with the same sort of thing about science. Galileo, the
Yep.
ancient, scientist, mathematician, everything that everyone knows about it, song by the Indigo Girls. Galileo's famous gravity experiment holds up even with individual atoms. Now, you were talking about this before we started about how amazing this is.
Yeah, because, so Galileo, one of his most famous feats is by going to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropping two different balls of different weights, and they impacted at the same time. And it was a big revolution. That the fact that no matter the mass or the size of an object, gravity pulls it in at the same rate. And he was actually kind of lucky in that experiment, because if the object that he used was too much lighter, wind resistance and air resistance does change that rate of falling. But so they reproduced that experiment. They took an actual bowling ball and a feather, right? So a feather catches the air, and that's why it slowly goes to the ground. But they put it in NASA's vacuum chamber, the vacuum chamber that they use to test spacecraft. So it's probably like, I don't know, 50, 75 feet in the air. And they drop the bowling ball and the feather at the same time. And when there's no air in this chamber, it hits the ground at the same time. And so the huge thing about this, like, everybody has known that exists, but they measured this on the individual atom level. So atoms of different sizes. It's just insane that they can control an individual atom. And they did it from a height of over 8 meters. So each meter is 3 or more feet or whatever. So like it's no small feat that they did. Like however they measured this, I would love to see the contraption that they used to measure this, because you have to do it in a gravity chamber, or what am I thinking about? Vacuum chamber, so that there's no air whatsoever, and that's easy enough. That's something that we can do. But controlling an individual atom to drop at the same exact time, two individual atoms, and fall, and measured it to the trillionth of a second. So when people say that, like, climate change might not be real, it's like, come on, we're measuring individual atoms to the trillionth of a second here. We can measure thermometers, and we can tell what's inside of the air. Okay, we have spectral analysis and all that stuff. And so it's just an incredible experiment. And I think the biggest point of that story is the fact that we can do this, the fact that we can measure individual atoms over an 8-meter long vacuum chamber is just like, that's pretty cool, to the trillionth of a second. I mean, it
is funny that the I just think it's funny that science truth is stranger than fiction. And that's basically what we're going to get to today with our topic of honoring James Randi, because James Randi was the epitome of that, basically noting that, the truth, this is a person who was a magician. I'm going to go into that in a little more detail, but was an illusionist that was basically honest about everything he did. And he was honest about what he was doing, even though everyone says, that's magic. I can't understand it. It's mystical. It's spiritual. It's this, that. And he's like, no, it is not. I'm tricking you, but it's something I trained myself in doing. There's a scientific explanation for what I am doing.
So open about it. He's like, I am fooling you. Like, I did this and I tricked you. There's no magic and mysticism. I just straight up fooled you. And like, his honesty about it is so commendable.
Yeah, and that's basically, so that thinking about how we nowadays can do these amazing things that, and it just, in science, it seemed completely, everything's like, oh, we're constantly breaking new ground, and it seems stranger than anything fictional. Here's a person that basically spearheaded that. And I think I would say for the layman, because the laymen are those of us that actually don't work in specific, highly concentrated scientific fields on the cusp of this new technology, but still appreciate it, or those that don't even know about science. I mean, James Randi was the person that could bring those over, being like, oh, I was wowed by his science. How about his magic? I want to know about his science, and that's exactly what he wanted. He didn't want to be. And I can think of so many other magicians, because now that we're talking about magicians, like David Copperfield, like that David Blaine, Chris Angel, those that don't want you to know what they're doing. They want to trick you. They want your money, and they don't care. And they'll say they're a performer, but they won't say about, what they're doing is real or not. And then
And for each one of them, and James Randi included, like, I think the biggest demonstrator of knowing magic and being able to do all these supernatural things is, do they age?
yeah,
And James Randi made it to 92. That was a really long life. He passed away. All of these other magicians are aging, and they lose as they age. They're losing physical strength. They grow old and all that. And if I was Magic Man, one of the first things I'd do is figure out this life extension thing, this whole
I know. Yeah, there's always like
forever
that.
thing. I'm just saying, and all these guys
Figure it
just seem
out.
to fail, and they're focused on card tricks and shit. So stuff.
Yeah, but hey, it's all right. There's an explicit. You can click on this.
3 episodes in, and I mean 3 seasons in, and I finally let one slip.
Yeah, there you go. The NASA Cup is okay. Let you get away with it. Go NASA. So I'm gonna give you a couple. We're just gonna basically talk briefly about Randy, what he was, and then talk about why he was. And I mentioned that because why he was around is very, very important. So he was a magician, an illusionist, that was honest about what he was doing. And I kind of make that example of, like, Penn and Teller are basically that today. They had a couple of shows out where they expose other things, and they have one about other magicians fooling them, called Fool Us. And they basically, when they know what a magician does, they use their own little sort of like code to tell the person, like, we basically figured you out. And then the magician goes, yeah, yes, you figured out what I did. So, but they're honest about the fact that it's an illusion and what people are doing illusions. And literally it's like a game for minds. Magicians play a game for mentalists, those that want to think about ways to confuse others and use sleight of hand and whatever else to kind of sway people so that they don't see what could be obvious to those that are really, really attuned to what's going on. And so it was interesting to know that James Randi was a mathematician, really into mathematics, and then he got into magic. And I did read something about when he was 15, he actually went and saw somebody who was considered a faith healer. And he saw that basically this person was doing the exact same things that James Randi did for his magic. He goes, this is exactly what my magic books were talking about. He's doing the exact same tricks that I do, but people are really believing this, and he's putting this other moniker on it, and they're all following him. So he went to jail, and he had to be busted out of jail, and it was like for 4 hours he had to be there. And he goes, if the psychics only knew that 4 hours would create this monster.
Right. I think I remember hearing him say something about that in the TED Talk that I heard, where he asked them to, like, they were going to communicate with his, like, dead grandma, and the dead grandma had hid the will somewhere, and they were like, can you tell me where the will is, grandma? And no, all she did was say, I miss you guys, and like, it's great here. I'm here with all of my past pets and people I know. And like, and what an impression, as a person who tricks people for a profession, what an impression that would make to have someone attempt to trick you using the same tools and tricks that you use in your own craft. Like,
to outwardly to trick people, but you're honest about, I'm tricking them. Like the book basically should, magic books basically say, it's basically how to trick people. They should just all be named
sleight of hand.
How to trick people. And then when you see somebody doing that in vain for something that people live and die for, their beliefs, their spiritual beliefs. And then you go, wait a minute, those are the exact same things. And to me, being the social psychologist I am, I'm like, it all comes back to psychology. And it's, I learned that from Scooby-Doo, right?
Right.
Every Scooby-Doo is always an a-hole basically trying to make money in the end. Is always
that's all it is.
Like,
that's what it tells you, man. That's why it's so important for us to keep showing kids Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. They're like, what? Mr. This, I would have gotten it if it wasn't for you kids and that dog.
That's right. Now, one of the things that I thought was incredible. Like I didn't know this about him, but I just before the show I was looking up some stuff, and so he did a Niagara Falls stunt where a crane hoisted him upside down in a straitjacket over the Niagara Falls, and he escaped. Of course, the straitjacket, returned safely to the other side. And when he started this thing, the way the video started, he had a like a 70s or 80s ski mask over his face. So I couldn't tell what age he was doing this. And they put him on the other side. Dude takes off his mask. He already was old. He had a whole beard and all this stuff. And it was got to be like the late 70s, early 80s that this happened. And that guy escaped a straitjacket, the oldest person I've ever seen do one of those tricks in such a high stressful situation. That guy, he's something else. I mean, nobody can do that. Even the average magician that you meet can't do that. Like that's, it's obviously like contortion, how they get out of the straitjacket. That's not magic and mystical. It's the holding yourself together while upside down over the Niagara Falls. Like that is some steely nerves right there. I definitely earned a new level of respect for him just by learning that. He was committed to magic stuff or whatever, and that's one of those things. The straitjacket thing is something all magicians try, I'm sure, eventually. And it's
it was like the whole Harry Houdini kind of began with that, and everybody wanted to be that. I mean, he got his from Harry Houdini and Blackmore or Blackstone, I believe, was another magician that a lot of people go back to. Now I know my mother was absolutely in love with the musician David Copperfield, and I went to see her in a city in Maine before he was doing something, and he did all these different stunts and such. And David Copperfield owns the most Harry Houdini like collectibles and antiques in the world. He has an entire museum like dedicated to him and everything like that. But it's just interesting how magicians, it's kind of like, I bet great chess players respect other chess players, and they know all the greats, they know all the moves. I mean, every time chess is played between great chess players, every single move is recorded, and they've got hundreds of years literally of that recorded data for that.
But I wonder, with magicians, I mean, talk about psychology.
Yeah.
Like, it's the psychology of a salesman, but amplified, right? Imagine tricking people and making millions of dollars. Like, I'm interested in learning about how it is possible that a human being can live with such guilt, such treachery. Like, I don't know, like, how do you, and manage to live. And so all of these magicians are doing it. Like, and when you just listed like at least 5 or more, household name magicians, and they live with themselves. And there's a few charlatans that we could list. I mean,
like anyone on Wall Street, stock traders, they're all magicians. They're all charlatans. I mean, there's the thing.
Sales.
That literally is.
Exactly.
I just don't like people who sell things, and I don't like people who trade money that it's not real. It's just numbers they throw around, and it's a
but it is real
thing. But it's
on the lowest level. Money is real. It is, the time of someone's life, life invested.
Yeah.
That's the core element of money is someone's life was spent to make that dollar, or.
It's when it's those that trade it as if it's not as important as someone's life.
Right. And they will say whatever it takes to make that next bonus check.
Yeah,
or
those
something
are
like
those
that.
are charlatans. So that's
Yeah, and it's the same thing. But I think Randy had something different, man. There was something in him that said that I can't do this. He
yeah,
was such a decent human being that he's like, how can I use this obvious skill that I have for good, right? And he did it because um, he was known as one of the original challengers to media misinformation. So he
yeah,
constantly liked to blast the media for getting people interested in fake news, this misinformation, like astrology. Every newspaper has an astrology section, and it's like to draw in advertising is what he had theorized. And I think that I think he was proven right over
yeah.
the course of time that a more entertaining story sells, and therefore it's perpetuated. And I think that was important to him, that he actually used his powers for good in exposing misinformation, and taught people that education was the way to avoid being deceived. Knowing more is a way to navigate the world more safely.
Yeah. One of the things he did, he was a co-founder of, and so I learned about James Randi through The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, which is a podcast that is leagues above this podcast, everybody. I'm sorry. They've been doing this for like 15 years plus. I joined them probably episode, I want to say 5, 6, maybe 10, and they're up to 700 something, I think now,
Early
800
adopter.
something.
Nice.
So, and yeah, when I was first given an iPod Classic, just saying, that's a long time ago. So, but I enjoyed that, and they taught me about him. They were always mentioning him, and I looked into him, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing, because I was always fascinated those that use their mind to do certain things, and especially when they do it for good, because always have that in mind. Do whatever you do for good. James Randi helped to co-found the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, which is known as PSYCOP, and which basically would take those that had these exorbitant claims. Look at, I can do this, I can bend spoons. A person named Uri Geller could do that.
Yes.
Or a person said, I can speak to the dead. And
a person that said that he could make pages move, pages move just by waving his hands, and he was really blowing on them, like, yeah.
And so James Randi would say, hey, and it started as I think maybe like $1,000 and gone up to $1 million for, if they couldn't prove you wrong, you would get $1 million. And he opened it up to anybody. And
I think it's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing. And they say, we can double, triple it. No one is ever going to get that money, because no one's going to prove that their psychic ability is ever going to work.
For any of those listeners out there, it's still out there. $1 million to anyone that can prove any paranormal activity or energy under laboratory conditions. That's all you have to do. If you believe that someone can see the future, have them come in and wear the hat that gives the reads brainwaves and stuff like that. If you think that you can, what is it, that when you move objects from far away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it telepathy or something like that? Maybe that might be something different. But
telepathy, I think, is reading minds and stuff like that. That's great. So even telepathy. All right. Well, this person is going to write down what they're exactly thinking about. You're in another room. Go ahead, read their mind. And no one ever stepped up to the challenge, let alone failed the challenge. No one ever stepped up to it. One person did, and then backed out immediately, and just sort of said,
you realize that I can't beat this.
Yeah, and she said, the reason why I'm not going to come and do this show, this $1 million challenge, is because you're a godless person or whatever. And so James Randi immediately, took that and just was sort of like, okay, well, that aside, $1 million is up for you. You can still take my money. Isn't that more of a stronger reason? If you think that I'm immoral, come take my money and you can have it. And still, that was it. That's the one challenger that he ever got. And they backed out, unfortunately. But on his show there, that successful show, I saw a few different examples of some charlatans or magicians that tried to beat him, but man, he was good. He was a good guy, and I'm glad that he had such a amazing life, because he had a lot to give.
He's
And
considered the honest liar, and
yes,
he was openly gay. I mean,
yep,
he didn't hold anything about himself. Like, he was open about everything. And, you know,
yeah,
and hearing from the skeptics guy talking about him being honest to everybody and being willing to talk to anybody and have a good conversation with anybody. I mean, that's great, even after somebody who'd lived for like almost, you know, 100 years and has, you know, have been on so many stages. You know, they don't have to be nice to the us minions, our small time people, but that's nice that he could stay honest and he could stay with his laurels, basically. And I think we kind of need to know this person, not just because he broke ground for, you know, all the skeptics and stuff like that, but because he can be somebody we can look at as a change agent for the future, you know, in us. He can motivate us to have that courage that, guess what? Yes, you might have to go to jail. Yes, you might be slandered. And now with social media, ripped apart, completely online, whatever, for your beliefs. But if it's something that you're doing this for the good of humanity, and it's based in science, it's based in evidence, it's based in all of these things we talk about in here, which is basically constantly reviewed, constantly being critical of yourself, then you should stand up for it. You shouldn't be afraid. And there's too many, especially in America where we live right now, too many that don't believe in science. They don't believe in reality, for the most part, natural world reality, that we need people to stand up to it now. I mean, it's not about everyone deserves to have an opinion and deserves to have a belief. No, it's about there's a reality and there's a non-reality. And we have to kind of stick with the reality. What has science told us? I know that I can drop my phone and gravity is pulling on my phone. I can't just say my belief doesn't believe that and let somebody have that belief because they're entitled to it. No, you're not. You're not entitled to that. Science says you're not entitled to that. Science doesn't care about what you believe in. You should understand that you need to follow what science says.
and that's a big problem, is that science is so unemotional that it's hard for humans who are highly emotional to grasp. And because good science is so cold and unemotional, it's often not exciting enough to capture the attention of a human, when there's so many alternatives out there that do capture emotion. And that comes back to, I mean, I think one of our first episodes that we talked about human fallibility and our own misconceptions and how easily we can be tricked. And I think that was something that James Randi talked about a lot, is that you can be tricked. You know, you make assumptions and you can be deceived according to those. And so analyze what assumptions you're making and learn about how you could be deceived.
Yeah.
And that could go for, you know, any part of life in general. And that's what he wanted, you know, people to look at, is be skeptical and analyze everything. And you have to hold it to a truth. And the truth is science, because there's nothing that explains the universe and the actions within it better than the cumulative gained knowledge of observation, which is what science is.
Yeah.
And so
I like the word cumulative, because that's what it is. It's not something that we're just like whipping out of a hat. This is something that people have spent their entire lives on for many, 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 many years, building up, so that we know what we know, because we're not going to make the same mistakes that were made in the past. I mean, people always say that history repeats itself. You can't learn from another's mistakes. And I say you can, and it's called science. Because if they went through the process for that, we can learn from what they did. We can learn that we don't have to do certain things anymore. We don't have to take someone's blood out and just let the bloodletting to let the evil out, right? The evil.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as germs. It's just this evil that's inside of them. Let the blood out.
The miasma theory. So the miasma theory was what preceded the germ theory. And the miasma was this mysterious dark energy that flowed out of unliving tissue and made people sick. So they, you can see the hint of truth, but you can see how easily misconstrued it is that, like, washing your hands wouldn't matter because it's this dark energy that flows around you and you just can't avoid it if it's there. And, it's certainly something that we have to look at constantly is what am I thinking right? And that's what, James Randi promoted was education, thinking about the world around you and applying logic to it. And I think that's something that I think that we try as educators to make sure we give out to our students, because it's so important, like to think for yourself, be skeptical, analyze everything that's going on, because we have preconceptions, we have assumptions. It's human nature, and
biases, heuristics, all that stuff, and
all things that we've talked about.
And the thing is, as educators, we're constantly questioning ourselves, and we're constantly looking at how we teach it, how we go about it. Could we say something different? Could we have done that? We're always doing that. We always want to get better at what we're doing, and we always want to be able to distill the best information at the time, because it can change, that we can. So we have to constantly be learning and constantly trying things out, and we're going to constantly keep trying things out. I mean, that's a given. Adaptability, change is a given. It's always going to happen, and that's what basically keeps us going. And I feel we kind of have to like change. If you don't like change, being a teacher or anything is going to be a bad profession, but I mean, just being alive is going to be bad if you don't like change. You can try to keep things the same in your life, but it's going to change on you. And in America on Tuesday, or whoever knows when they're going to finish the tally of the votes, that's going to be a gigantic change no matter what happens.
Tuesday will be a big change no matter what. And the rest of that week will especially be a change. Like there's no normal anymore at this point.
Yeah.
We're going to move into a new normal in a week. And as an American, it's interesting to have this looming deadline in front of us. And, I think, to do service to James Randi, I think that we should all, look at the world around us and apply the best logic and reason we can come up with and try to steer it on the best path for all of humanity and consider others more than just ourselves. And hopefully we make it out the other side and, more prosperous for it. And we can move on to more important things like figuring out what humanity is going to do when we got to leave the earth, and what we can do to extend our lives and all that stuff.
That sounds like a great note to end on. So everybody take care out there. We don't even know what's going to happen next week. I mean, aside from politics,
I can't wait for next week.
We don't even
wait for this.
know, when we might be closed down, and we might be season 4, which we may consider that to be the season where we actually go back virtual again. So but we made it to episode 10. That's amazing, and thank you for coming with us on this journey. Please make comments, subscribe, have other people subscribe,
and please check out more James Randi videos. Perhaps we can put a couple in the comments or something, because he's an amazing man, and his legacy should be looked at by any skeptical, educated person that is curious about the world. Like, James Randi is a name that everybody should know.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well, I'm Mr. James.
And I'm Mr. Richie.
And we are the educators. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.